today's episode of the program Environment Watch, we examine the ongoing debates about genetically modified organisms or foods, their socio-economic and environmental implication. But first, let's join Ugochukwu Bamidele on the news segment.
Here is the news on Environment Watch. On the headlines, Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency wants Nigerians to avoid flood-prone areas. A Federal Executive Council okays environmental policy, bids Minister farewell. Huge crater formed in Siberia as permafrost grows at alarming rate. I am Ugochukwu Bamidele. Now the details. The Director General of Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, Mr. Moses Beckley, has said Nigerians living in floodplains and other flood-prone areas should relocate before the rainy seasons set in. He also said they should clear drainage systems and waterways around their areas to avoid flooding and its damaging effects on lives and properties. Beckley, in a statement, also said the rainy season should be used to harvest rainwater appropriately for use when the rains subside later in the year. The Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency BUS noted that the 2016 annual flood outlook achieved tremendous success in terms of projected probability of flood risk areas and reduction in the area that had hitherto been categorized as highly flood-prone areas. This, he said, was due largely to the prompt and precautionary measures taken by the citizens to avoid or mitigate flood disasters and damage based on warnings issued by the agency. He also noted that the people were adhering to warnings in the forecasts and sensitization which the agency carried out in all the 8 hydrological areas and flood-prone sites of the country. And our acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has said that Nigeria was making arrangements to inaugurate the first African sovereign green bond to address climate change and environmental projects. Professor Osinbajo made the commitment at the Green Bonds Capital Markets and Investors Conference organized by the Federal Ministry of Environment and the Debt Management Office at the Nigerian Stock Exchange office in Lagos. Acting President Osinbajo, who described the initiative as a new addition to the market's funding portfolio, stated that the proceeds will be used to fight climate change. According to Professor Osinbajo, the bond issuance will support the federal government's shift to non-oil-based assets for project financing for economic growth and development. He said that the proceeds of the bonds would be used for environmental projects such as renewable energy, micro-utilities in 3 communities estimated at 10 billion naira. The Federal Executive Council has approved the revised national policy on environment. The former Minister of Environment, Amina Mohammed, told State House reporters that the policy was first formulated in 1991 and later revised in 1999. She said what the policy does is to look at all the different intersectoral issues that we have, whether it's with water, health, power or agriculture, and bring them in to have a multi-sectoral response. She went ahead to say this new policy framework is imperative to capture some of the emerging issues as regards the environment. This concerns such as climate change, coastal erosion, desertification, erosion, pollution, and insecurity, which has been exacerbated by the struggles for environmental resources. We see this in countries at all levels. This new policy framework was approved and puts in place a much better opportunity to engage with states, local governments and communities and executing the priorities of the change agenda. The Federal Executive Council held a valedictory session last week for and eulogized the Environment Minister Amina Mohammed, who was recently appointed as Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. And now the National Coordinator, Nigeria Erosion and Watershed Project, Salisu Dahiru, has said measures are being put in place to ensure that the menace of land degradation becomes a thing of the past in the country. He also harped on the need for the populace to prevent themselves against land degradation. The coordinator stated this at a training program organized by the agency in collaboration with the federal government and the World Bank, with the objective to support Nigeria towards managing land degradation and rehabilitation of dams in the state. Dahiru stressed the need for people to desist from cutting down trees, dumping refuse on water channels, and building houses around watershed areas. He pointed out that if we are to do development, then we must concentrate on making sure that the land continues to support life. The coordinator lauded the Sokoto state government for committing over 1 billion naira counterfeit funding for the success of the projects in the state. Now outside Nigeria, there is a dramatic tadpole-shaped hole in the ground near the Yana River Basin in a vast area of permafrost called the Batagika crater, according to scientists. The crater is also known as a mega slump, and it is the largest of its kind, almost 0.6 miles, approximately 1 kilometer long, and 282 feet, approximately 86 meters deep. But these figures will soon change because it's growing quickly. Locals in the area in Siberia avoid it, saying it is a doorway to the underworld, but for scientists, the site is of great interest. According to scientists, looking at the layers exposed by the slum in Siberia can give indications of how our world once looked. At the same time, the acceleration of the growth gives an immediate insight into the impact of climate change on the increasing fragile permafrost in Siberia. The trigger that led to the crater started in the 1960s. Rapid deforestation meant that the ground was no longer shaded by trees in the warmest summer months. This incoming sunlight then slowly warmed the ground. This was made worse by the loss of cold sweat from trees as they transpire, which would have kept the ground cool. For these reasons, scientists are actively monitoring the crater. Scientific research has found that analyzing the now exposed layers could reveal 200,000 years of climatic history. And that's it on the news on Environment Watch. Many thanks for staying tuned. I am Ugochukwu Bamidele. It's now back to Sonny Duke Okosun for the rest of Environment Watch today. Just stay tuned.
Genetically modified organisms, GMOs, are products of genetic engineering, also known as genetic modification. Genetic engineering, or modern biotechnology, is a technology that allows scientists to create plants, animals, and microorganisms by manipulating genes in a way that is not possible via traditional or natural processes. GM technology is not simply an extension of conventional agriculture, as it is radically different from traditional plants and animal breeding. Genetic engineering involves the artificial manipulation of seeds at the cellular level and allows DNA from one type of organism, such as an animal, to be introduced into another unrelated organism, such as a plant. A fish and a tomato would not crossbreed in nature, but in the laboratory, scientists can take a gene from a fish, insert it into a tomato, and essentially create an entirely new organism. The technology is not as exact as it may appear, and results from genetic manipulation can at times vary vastly from intended outcomes. It should be noted that usually it is genes of commercial interest that are transferred. Architect Inumo Basi is Executive Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation.
The acronym GMO stands for Genetically Modified Organisms, and the whole matter is tied around the fact that mankind has been working over the years, over centuries, to enhance the way food is produced and to ensure that foods are preserved, and also sometimes from agricultural products to derive medicine or other or use food products for other purposes. And so genetically modified organisms are products of modern biotechnology. We do have traditional biotechnology which is ages old. For example, the way our people ferment food products to process them from one type to another. For example, people make alcoholic drinks from fruits or from the juice that come from palm trees. Also the process of baking bread and things like that. All these are natural, or rather traditional biotechnology. But there's a new kind of biotechnology which involves the creation of new organisms by men in laboratories. And this is done mostly by taking genetic material from the DNA of one organism and placing it in another organism, so as, of course, to produce a new variety that addresses certain issues. And so GMOs can be created to create a variety that would withstand certain disease, can create varieties that would withstand certain chemicals which are used like herbicides to kill weeds. So you could take a variety of, let's say, corn, and then genetically modify it. A company can modify it by introducing other genetic material from a bacteria, from a virus, or from an animal. So to ensure that when a certain herbicide or weed killer produced by the same company that produces the genetically modified corn, when that weed killer is spread over the farm, every other crop or weed on that farm would die, and only this genetically modified variety would survive. In that way, the farmers would not need to weed. That is the whole idea, because when you spray the chemical, the weeds die. But the implication of this is that you cannot do mixed cropping the way we grow our food naturally. If you grow yam, you cannot grow cassava, you cannot grow corn, you cannot grow watermelon or other vegetables. It has to be one crop. And so you are going to move from mixed cropping to monocropping. And the challenge also is that for a thing like corn, although one farmer may decide to plant genetically modified corn, while the next farmer says, I'm not going to plant genetically modified corn, I want to plant my normal varieties. The problem is that because pollination happens by wind or by insects or whatever, those kind of means, you cannot stop the genetically modified corn from cross-pollinating with the natural variety. So the man that doesn't want to grow genetically modified corn will have his crops contaminated by the genetically modified variety. And this has been a big problem in the United States and other places, because whenever a company modifies the genetic material of a particular crop, they claim a patent right. They have a copyright, so to speak, in ordinary street language. They hold the patent to that variety, which means that this is unique, this belongs to us, nobody else owns it, and nobody can use it except us, nobody can use it except our permission. And at the same time, these same companies tell us that their product is equivalent to the normal variety. And we ask the question, if they're equivalent to the normal variety, why do you hold a patent right to it? Holding a patent right shows that it's different, it's not normal. It's a creation of man. And we find it strange that men will claim to produce life, whereas they cannot produce from scratch. They're only picking existing varieties, and they pick the best existing varieties to modify.
Once these man-made organisms are released into the environment and the food chain, they reproduce, contaminate natural varieties, and cannot be recalled. And because the technology is fairly young, the long-term effects of GMOs on the environment are yet to be fully known. Most analysts that are pro-GMO posit that the technology helps to increase yield, produces pest-resistant varieties with high nutritional value. Professor Ignatius Onimawo is a nutritionist and the Vice Chancellor Ambrose Ali University AAU Ekuma. He sheds more light on this school of thought.
The issue of GM foods have been a public debate. I remember some years ago, close to 12 years ago, I was in Ethiopia in one of our conferences where the issue was hotly debated. Since this moment, there have been no proven scientific evidence. When I mean proven, that is, you have been able to test it and concluded directly that when you take GM food, you are likely to suffer from cancer or any such things. But there are indicators that make people feel that maybe after so many years, they may begin to manifest, they may begin to affect the genome of the individual. To me, it's still highly speculative. So that is why in countries like US and some other countries where GM foods are sold openly, they are normally identified and labeled as GM foods. So it is left for you to buy or not. Also closely related to that is what we call the organic foods, the ones that are produced without chemical fertilizers. Those ones, yes, that have been proven to be of health benefit because they are produced from natural manures. The ones that are used chemical fertilizer for, because of the fact that residues are likely to be carried into the foods, those ones could be harmful. But GM foods, one thing we want to understand is that they tinker with the genetic makeup of the food. The reasons for GM in the first instance are 1, to increase yield, 2, to resist disease, and 3, to improve nutritional content of the food. GM has been able to achieve all this. But in actualizing this, people are looking at it. Why did you tinker with the natural genome of the plants or the food, as the case may be? That there's likelihood. In fact, the group that are growing by the day and claiming that they have evidence to prove that when you take them, they may affect life expectancy, they may affect cancer. Like I said, I'm yet to see a fully documented evidence of researches that have been carried over the 10, 20, or 30 years. You know, when it comes to human research, before you can really conclude and you can say, I want to ban this particular food substance, there must have been a period of study, the effects on the human beings over the period of time. I want to believe that American scientists and the American public too are quite knowledgeable enough. If this GM food were so dangerous as everybody is claiming, they will never allow it to be sold in their market. They will have put a policy to ban them.
However, civil society groups in Nigeria and around the world have engaged in a thorough global education of the performance and the impacts of GM crops releases around the world since 1996. These efforts have been aimed at providing an accurate picture of the global spread and impacts of these crops and organisms, and to help separate the hype from reality. Since the introduction of genetically modified crops close to 2 decades ago, the biotech industry has fought tooth and nail to ensure the spread of these crops around the world. This effort has not yielded the expected results because the crops have not provided the benefits touted by the biotech industry, and because industry-promoted hype has largely failed to convince both the farmers and the consumers. Genetically modified crops have been withdrawn either due to safety and health concerns as well as food contamination. Examples include Monsanto's withdrawal of its genetically modified GM maize LY038 in Europe due to safety concerns. Additionally, more than 1,000 farmers from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Missouri in the USA have sued Bayer AG based in Leverkusen, Germany, for allegedly contaminating their farms with genetically modified GM rice seeds.
Now, one of the problems, I'll mention a few. One of the issues that people have with genetically modified organisms is that, one, the process crosses species boundaries. You can take a genetic material from a plant and put it in an animal, or pick from an animal and put in a plant. These are not natural, no matter how you look at it. This crosses the boundaries that ought not to be crossed and would not be crossed normally in the normal process of reproduction. Some years ago, there was a variety of rice that was made and it was designed, genetically modified, so that when children eat it, it will fight diarrhea and help them to recover from diarrhea. Now, that rice was genetically modified using genetic materials taken from human breast milk. So you're eating rice, you're having material from a human body inside that rice. Now, I'm not saying that that's cannibalism. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that something has happened that crosses normalcy. But the problem with that particular variety of rice is that when it was tested in Peru, Latin America, the parents of children on which it was tested were not given prior information, and they did not give consent to having their children used as guinea pigs or laboratory testing. And I think a couple of children lost their lives and others were affected by it. And the critical issue here is to fight diarrhea in children, babies. What you just need is what is called ORT, oral rehydration therapy. And that is a mixture of sugar and salt in water. And any woman, any mother can do that. You don't need to go to the market to look for genetically modified rice to fight the rehydration.
So you've heard about GMOs, what it means, and the challenge, and that it has no boundaries, and the issues of contamination, and what happens in other countries. And many countries have actually banned the use of GMOs. I mean, actually in Europe, GMOs are not used for human consumption, they're used for animal feed. So in Nigeria, when we're having this thing, you have to consider what is happening in other countries and the issues and the concerns.
2006 marked the first time independent monitoring and testing was undertaken at the regional level by African civil society groups, which confirmed contamination of the food chain by GMOs in West Africa. This was with regard to release of unapproved Liberty Link Rice 601. A round of monitoring activities was undertaken in Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, Sierra Leone by local chapters of civil society groups after the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, revealed on August 18, 2006 that GM rice unapproved for human consumption had contaminated commercial rice seeds. The samples obtained in Africa were sent to an independent laboratory in the United States, and tests confirmed the presence of the illegal GM rice in 9 samples. These samples were from Ghana and Sierra Leone. A follow-up testing in 2007 found the illegal rice in Ghana and Nigeria. More than 15 countries in Europe identified the experimental GMO in the rice supplies, and imports were tested to prevent further contamination. Mexico, Japan, and several other countries around the world took similar measures, with some suspending long-grain rice imports from the USA. The most dramatic GM crop failures have happened in the cotton-growing regions of India, where over 300,000 farmers were alleged to have committed suicide. From reports, the farmers committed suicide after they became indebted as yields did not match their investment in procuring seeds and chemical inputs. Commercial production of GM crops is largely confined to 4 crops: soya bean, maize, oilseed, and cotton. Over 90% of the total area in just 6 countries, US, Brazil, Argentina, Canada, China, and India, account for 95% of the area grown. When the biotech industry seeks to indicate the spread of the technology, the countries they classify as biotech mega countries are those that have GM crops on up to 50,000 hectares of land. In 2008, it was reported by industry sources that more than 25 million hectares of GM crops were grown in world, which amounted to just 2.6% of farmland. It is important to note that the proportion of the world's farmers actively growing GM crops is about 1%, about 13.3 million, as stated by the biotech industry out of a total of 1.3 billion. The failure of BT Cotton to eliminate poverty amongst small-scale farmers in Makathini Flat, South Africa, showed the limits of the push of this technology.